The one doctrines of religion are symbols used by saints and sages to describe spiritual experiences, as ordinary men use words to describe mental and physical experiences. Students of religion recognize two kinds of spiritual experience, of which the first resembles what we call a state of mind, such as happiness, love, or fear, and the second, an experience of something outside ourselves, as when we see stars, trees, or hills. In the language of religion, the first kind of experience may be called the sense of freedom, salvation, or deliverance, and the second, a beatific vision. The doctrines of religion have their origin in attempts to convey these experiences to others by enshrining a state of mind within an idea about the universe, or by recording a vision as the basis of an article of faith. Visions are somewhat more spectacular and sensational than states of mind, and because they have form, color, and motion, they are easier to describe. Thus, they are common in all religions, but they do not necessarily carry with them the sense of freedom, salvation, or deliverance that is the most profound, the most satisfying, and the most lasting of religious experiences. There are few who would not rather have this sense than 1,000 visions. Many attempts have been made to describe the feeling of salvation, which the Buddhists call nirvana and the Hindus call moksha. Where these descriptions are in the form of doctrines, we notice that among such doctrines, there is a wide variety of differences whereby students of religion are often misled. If the doctrines of Christianity are different from those of Hinduism, it does not necessarily follow that the religions are different, for more than one doctrine may describe a single state of mind, and without this state of mind, the religion as a mere collection of doctrines has no meaning whatever. It is just as if it were a babble of unintelligible words. But doctrines differ because people have different mental backgrounds and traditions. An English person and a Chinese person may have the same feeling, but they will speak of it in different ways because they are relating it to different mental contexts. It is therefore most unwise to study religion from the standpoint of doctrine as doctrine, for this is the purest superficiality. Doctrines and conceptual ideas vary, as languages vary, but one and the same meaning may be conveyed by both English and French. Christians believe in a personal God, and Buddhists do not. But as regards the true essentials of religion, this difference is as superficial as the fact that in French, every noun has a gender, whereas this is not so in English. Therefore, to extract the true meaning of a religious doctrine, we must ask, what does this doctrine mean in terms of a state of mind? What sort of feeling towards life and the universe would have caused a man to think in this way? A religious experience is like the experience of beauty. Indeed, it is something closely akin to feeling beauty in the whole of life, instead of in a single picture-scene image or melody. Beethoven and Stravinsky may both arouse the sense of beauty, and they are quite as different in their own ways as Christianity and Buddhism. The important thing, however, is that they arouse that sense. We may discuss and argue over their respective merits till all are blue, without coming to any conclusion. Could it be more profitable, however, if we could take one who feels beauty in Beethoven and one who feels beauty in Stravinsky, and then consider the varying degrees of profundity in their respective feelings? But here we should be dealing with such intangible and imponderable factors that ordinary methods of criticism and discussion would be useless, and we could only judge by intuition. The same principle applies in religion, for the feeling of beauty in art or music is here the feeling of salvation. By this I do not mean freedom of moral conscience, nor even the certainty of an everlasting life of bliss after death, although such things may be attained by any number of different religious systems. These elementary forms of salvation have much the same relation to the deeper forms as mere sensuous thrill has to the perception of beauty. What then is a truly deep feeling of salvation? Insofar as this question can be answered at all, perhaps it is best to consider one of the greatest doctrines in all religion in terms of a state of mind. For this purpose, the best choice is probably the Hindu or Vedanta conception of Brahman, because this is at once the simplest and the most subtle of doctrines. Subtle just because it is so simple. The same doctrine is found in other systems, but Vedanta gives it the best philosophical expression. It is that all possible things, events, thoughts, and qualities are aspects of a single reality, which is sometimes called the self of the universe. In themselves, these many aspects have no reality. They are real only in that each one of them is a manifestation of Brahman, or the self. To put it in another way, the true self of any given thing is Brahman, and not something that belongs exclusively to the thing in question. Each individual is therefore an aspect of Brahman, and no two aspects are the same. But man's self is much more than what he considers to be his ego, his personality called John Smith or William Jones. The ego is a device or trick Maya employed so that Brahman may manifest itself, and man's innermost self is therefore identical with the self of all things. Thus, if anyone wants to know what Brahman is, he has just to look around, to think, to act, to be aware, to live for all that is known by the senses, thought in the mind, or felt in the heart, is Brahman. In other systems of thought, Brahman has many other names that are primary. In Chinese, mystics the world over find similar meaning in the words called Ella, infinite life, Elan Vita, the absolute, or whatever other term may be used. In fact, the intuition of the one reality is the essence of all mystical religion. But few people understand clearly what it is to feel this intuition in oneself. We are perhaps more apt to think of this idea just as a metaphysical speculation, but a more or less reasonable theory about the fundamental structure of life. Someday we think it might be possible for us to delve down into the deepest recesses of our souls, lay our fingers on this mysterious universal essence, and avail ourselves of its tremendous powers. This, however, does not seem quite the right way to look at it. For one thing, it is not to be found only in the deepest recesses of our souls. And for another, the word essence makes it sound as if it were a highly refined, somewhat gaseous or electric and wholly formless potency that somehow dwells inside things. But in relation to Brahman, there is neither inside nor outside. Sometimes it is called the principle of non-duality, because nothing else exists beside it, and nothing is excluded from it. It is to be found on the surface as much as in the depths, and in the finite as much as in the infinite. For it has wisely been said that there is nothing infinite apart from finite things. Thus it can neither be lost nor found, and you cannot avail yourself of its powers any more than you can dispense with them. For all these conceptions of having and not having, of gain and loss, finite and infinite, belong to the principle of duality. Every dualism is exclusive. It is this and not that, that and not this. But we are both known as the one reality is all-inclusive. For the Upanishads say one. It is made of consciousness and mind. It is made of life and vision. It is made of the earth and the waters. It is made of air and space. It is made of light and darkness. It is made of desire and peace. It is made of anger and love. It is made of virtue and vice. It is made of all that is afar. It is made of all. What then is non-duality in terms of a state of mind? How does the mystic, who has realized his identity with the one reality, think and feel? Does his consciousness expand from out of his body and enter into all other things so that he sees with others' eyes and thinks with others' brains? Only figuratively, for the self which is in him and in all others does not necessarily communicate to the physical brain of John Smith, mystic, what is seen by the eyes of Pai Wang, construction worker, on the other side of the earth. I do not believe that spiritual illumination is to be understood in quite this sensational way. We shall answer the question sufficiently if we can discover what is a non-dualistic state of mind. Does it mean a mind in so intense a state of concentration that it contains only one thought? Strictly speaking, the mind never contains more than one thought at a time. Such is the nature of thinking. But if spirituality means thinking only and always of one particular thing, then other things are excluded, and this is still duality. Does it mean then a mind which is thinking of everything at once? Even if this were possible, it would exclude the convenient faculty of thinking of one thing at a time, and would still be dualistic. Clearly, these two interpretations are absurd, but there is another way of approach. Spiritual illumination is often described as absolute freedom of the soul, and we have seen that the one reality is all-inclusive. Is the mind of the mystic singularly free and all-inclusive? If so, it would seem that his spirituality does not depend on thinking any special kinds of thoughts, on having a particular feeling ever in the background of his soul. He is free to think of anything and nothing to love and to fear, to be joyful or sad, to set his mind on philosophy or on the trivial concerns of the world. He is free to be both a sage and a fool, to feel both compassion and anger, to experience both bliss and agony. And in all this, he never breaks his identity with the one reality, God, whose service is perfect freedom. For he knows that in whatever direction he goes, and in whichever of these many opposites he is engaged, he is still in perfect harmony with the one that includes all directions and all opposites. In this sense, serving God is just living. It is not a question of the way in which you live, because all ways are included in God. To understand this is to wake up to your freedom, to be alive. But is that all? Is it possible that spirituality can be anything so absurdly simple? It seems to mean that to attain spirituality, you have just to go on living as you have always lived, all life being God. Any kind of life is spiritual. You say that if the idea were not so ludicrous, it would be exceedingly dangerous. First, we might remind ourselves of a saying of the Chinese sage Lao Tzu. When the wise man hears of the Tao, he puts it into practice. It's repeated to span that's the first. When to bound you with life with. First, we might remind ourselves of a saying of the Chinese sage Lao Tzu. When the wise man hears of the Tao, he puts it into practice. It's repeated to span that's the first. No, I would never that. Begin when I was lying for you. When sees the speech, properly terminated, when sees a huge dust, I lost it. Indeed, it would not be worthy to be called Tao if he did not laugh at it. The idea that any kind of life is spiritual is a terrible blow to man's pride. From the spiritual point of view, it puts us on the same level as stones, vegetables, worms, and beetles. It makes the righteous man no nearer to salvation than the criminal, and the sage no nearer than the lunatic. Thus, if all else about the idea is folly, it is at least a powerful antidote to spiritual pride and self-reward for being a good boy. Indeed, it is not something which you can get at all, however fierce your efforts, however great your learning, and however tireless your virtue. In the spiritual world, there is no top and bottom of the class. Here all men and all things are equal, and whatever they do can go neither up nor down. The only difference between sage or mystic and ordinary unenlightened man is that the one realizes his identity with God or Brahman, whereas the other does not. But the lack of realization does not alter the fact. How then does one attain this realization? Is it just a matter of going on living as one has lived before, knowing that one is free to do just exactly as one likes? Beware of the false freedom of doing as you like. To be really free, you must also be free to do as you don't like. For if you are only free to do as you like, you are still tied up in dualism, being bound by your own whims. A better way of attaining realization is to let yourself be free to be ignorant, for fools also are one with God. If you strive to attain realization and try to make yourself God, you simply become an intense egotist. But if you allow yourself freedom to be yourself, you will discover that God is not what you have to become, but what you are. In spite of yourself. For have we not heard it said 1,000 times that God is always found in humble places? The Tao said, Lao Tzu is like water, it seeks the lowly level which men abhor. And while we are busy trying to add cubits to our stature so that we may reach up to heaven, we forget that we are getting no nearer to it and no further away. For the kingdom of heaven is within you. One Mascarotrans, Himalayas of the Soul, Translations of the Principal Upanishads, London, 1938-89.